Off season? Who said anything about an off season? The 2025 NFL season is underway. We've got a ton of free agency signings, trades, cuts, all the latest and greatest. Make sure you stay tuned to check out the best and the worst of the defensive free agency. Ooh, welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus Podcast. What is up, folks? I am your host, the D-Gen Doc, and more importantly, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Derek Bennett, aka Professor Locks. How we doing tonight, brother?
We're not doing too bad, man. Just enjoying this NFL free agency week.
Football's back? Question mark, question mark. At least it gives us the illusion that
That's
we
right.
finally got some
Might be
football back.
short-lived, but
Right?
we got it back.
It will be short-lived. The news from day one of free agency to now, like day 4, it's like, I went from DK Metcalf to like KJ Osborne or something like that, right? Like that guy's
Right.
still in the league. Oh, geez.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, but we've got a ton to get to. The way we're gonna do this is it's the off season, so we like to have a little fun. We're gonna do it like almost an award show. We're gonna talk about the biggest winner, the biggest loser, who had the best fit, what was the most surprising. We've got a bunch of categories lined up for you, and without further ado, let's kick it off. So
Let's
we
get
are
rolling.
talking NFL offseason defense edition. That is right, our free agency superlatives. And we're going to start this off on a high note because we're going to talk about our biggest winner. Who is the team that is absolutely crushing it on the defensive side of the ball and free agency? For me, it's none other than the Denver Broncos. How about what say you, my friend?
Yeah, let me jump up to New England with the Patriots.
All
On the
right.
defensive side.
So I'll kick us off here. Broncos. Why do I think the Broncos are the winner of free agency at this point? Well, just look at the additions they've added to an already really good defense.
Yeah.
Right? Talanoa Hufanga coming over from San Francisco. A guy who last season he was coming off that ACL tear, kind of getting back into the flow of things, picking it up near the end of the season. Now he's back. Year 2 off that ACL is where we really see guys excel.
No doubt.
Now you've got Riley Moss. You've got Daquan Jones. You've got Pat Surtain. And then you add Hufanga
Reigning
back
defensive
there.
player of the year.
The reigning defensive player of the year, right? You've got a very formidable secondary. Arguably, immediately Starter puts them towards the top. And then you add to that one of the best cover linebackers in Dre Greenlaw, right? A guy who now he's year 2 off his Achilles tear. So now he is getting back into the fold. So I love their additions. And I also love them retaining defensive tackle DJ Jones and Justin Shrinaud, who stepped in for Alex Singleton when he tore his ACL coming back in. So I just love that. It's already one of the best defenses in the NFL. And now we add 2 key pieces at important positions. Absolutely love it. Quick honorable mention for me. I did want to mention, because they're not for you, Carolina Panthers. I do think they are doing some good things there. The additions of Trayshawn Wharton, Trevon Moehrig, and defensive end Patrick Jones. I think those are solid additions. They retained, both their corners in J.C. Horn and Michael Jackson there. So I did want to give them a little bit of shout out. I think the Denver Broncos in a better spot right now, but I did want to shout out Carolina. All right, why don't you talk about those New England Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, you bring in a guy like Mike Vrabel, who just loves tough, grindy dudes. And I think from a defensive side of things, you don't get much more grimy and tough and just like hard nosed than a guy like Robert Spillane coming over from the Raiders. Like that dude will put his head into brick walls if you ask him to.
I love that signing. Yep.
So, I mean, Bob Spillane, he's going to be that guy for Vrabes. But then you bring in a guy like Carlton Davis to help the back end. And then a Super Bowl champion, Milton Williams. But again, like the Patriots, when they were in their heyday, besides, I mean, obviously, Tom Brady, he's okay. But like early on, in Tom Brady's career,
Yep.
it was a defensive football team. And how better can you help a guy like Drake May than give him a solid defense? And they brought in some really cool key guys on that defense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Check out our episode. We did an offensive episode when we broke some of these things down. Patriots maybe lacking a little bit on the offensive side, but the
Sure.
defensive side, man, they are absolutely they're nailing it. So I agree with you
Yep.
there. Them getting on the an early W there in NFL offseason. All right, now we're going to move from team and we're going to go to the best fit. Which player is in a great situation to have an awesome, awesome year? And for me, it's a guy who is staying in that same place, and that is Mr. Nick Bolton. Him staying in Kansas City. And for you,
I got a guy that didn't play last year in Hassan Reddick going down to the Bay to help out the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
yeah, why don't you tell us about Mr. Reddick? Maybe hopefully he won't miss half the season. Lollygagging, freelancing.
Yeah. I think the Bucks went ahead and paid the dude what he wants to be paid to get that out of the way.
You hear
But
that, New York? Crazy idea. Pay
exactly,
your guy.
exactly. But I mean, you line up him up next to Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea. That front seven is going to be flying around, making plays all over the place. So again, it typically goes back to the trenches. If you have a solid offensive line or a solid defensive line, in this case, like you're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage and control the game.
Yep.
Vita Vea just blocks up the entire center of that defensive line. And that should allow Hassan Reddick just to wreak havoc around the outside. So I really like that signing for the Bucks.
Yeah, no, and I think the Bucks they've got a couple young guys in Yaya Diaby. They did get rid of Tyrone Sharonka
Yep.
there, but they've kind of been missing an alpha on the
Yep.
off the edge there,
Yep.
and
Since
yeah,
Shaq Barrett kind of retired or did whatever he went through a couple of years ago, like
yep,
they've been missing that guy on the outside, and
exactly.
this gives them that guy.
Nope, I love it. Yep, I do think Reddick is a great fit there. And then for me, it's Nick Bolton because
Yeah,
he is just so integral
he's a
to what
playmaking machine.
Spags wants to do. I
Yep.
mean, Spags likes to run a certain style of offense, a blitz heavy man coverage off or defense, excuse me.
Yep.
And Bolton, like you said, he does everything. He's
Yep.
been the leading tackler for the last 3 years. Two that he got injured the last year, but anyway,
Yep.
he's a leader whenever he's healthy in tackling.
Yep.
He has interceptions. He gets on the board with sacks. Like he just does so much for that defense. Gets
No doubt.
guys lined up. He's kind of that brain trust on the field, that coordinator on the field for them. And I think for him, I think that defense is a really, really it fits his skill set. He's a kind of a quicker linebacker. Maybe not the true prototypical run stopper, right? It's not that he excels and is the best in pass coverage. He's just a solid all-around linebacker that has really excelled in this role. And I love the fact that they kept him there. I thought that was a big priority for them
Yep.
in the offseason. So getting that done there, for me, that is my best fit. All right. Let's talk about some lowest lows. We've talked about the highs, and let's talk about some losers. And the biggest loser, at least on the defensive side for me, maybe I'm being a little bit of a hater,
A little
but
biased here.
I'll say it. The reigning Super Bowl champion, Philadelphia Eagles. Well, this is 2025, folks, and they're my biggest loser to start this free agency, at least on the defensive side of the ball. How about you?
Yeah, the San Francisco 49ers, and you've touched on a couple of these guys already, but the Niners have lost a bunch of key guys on their defense.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about these Eagles, and let me tell you why I'm not just being a salty Giants fan. Losses: Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Oren Burks, Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, and Chauncey Gardner Johnson. Right, so that is 5
That's
starters,
a
I
lot.
believe, and 6 contributors on that Super Bowl defense there.
Yep.
That is a big big deal, right? That's not just one or two guys. I understand they still have a good young core. I don't think they're going to go to bottom 5 in the league or anything like that. But that defense, that really led that team.
It was
They
solid.
were a
Yeah,
dominant unit,
no doubt.
especially in the Super Bowl. You're taking away some key pieces. You're really relying on your youth there, and those guys are stepping up. You also got Brandon Graham retiring. You've got Nakobe Dean coming off a patellar tendon tear,
Yep.
which is a major injury. He injured himself late in the season. I don't think he's going to be ready for the start of the season. And then Nolan Smith, who should be ready, but he tore his triceps in the Super Bowl.
Yep.
So, it may take him some time to get back into the fold there. So that's, 7, 8 guys who are compromised, if not completely gone.
Yep.
As far as I will give them a little credit, re-signing Zach Bond, huge for them. Went from a guy off the street to an all-pro caliber guy. And then they did bring in Adoree Jackson, who, as a Giants fan, I'm not nearly as salty about this one. If he can stay on the field, maybe it'll be good. But the dude doesn't want to tackle fucking anybody, and he's not getting any younger. So I don't think that's a huge one, but I digress. Philadelphia Eagles, my biggest loser on the defensive side. How about yours?
Yeah, I just don't know what I mean. I get it from San Francisco standpoint. Like, you're gonna have to pay your quarterback at some point, and they've been paying everybody but Brock Purdy over the last 3 or 4 years. So like, their offense and defense has had studs everywhere, and now it's time to start making some moves. So you lose a guy like Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw and Floyd and Javon Hargrave, and it's like, the Niners are not going to be the Niners that we've seen over the last 2, 3, 4 seasons.
Yep.
And from a defensive standpoint, like you mentioned it, Dre Greenlaw, he makes plays all over the place. He's one of the best covered linebackers in the league. Before Hufanga tore his ACL, I believe a couple years ago, like he was one of the best safeties in the league.
Yep.
And then you again start to lose, and we saw this last year. You start to lose the depth on that defensive line. They were not the same pass rush last year that they had been the previous 2 years before. And yes, you still have Nick Bosa there, but like, what made their defense really start humming 2, 3 years ago was they were rotating guys every single play.
Yep.
And now you're relying on some youth, you're relying on a bunch of new pieces that I just don't know if they're going to have the same impact.
I completely agree there. You lose Leonard Floyd, who kind of was a little bit to help out with Nick Bosa. But yeah, you mentioned it, even last season, like, when you think about elite pass rushes and defensive lines, that depth is so important. We saw it with Philadelphia last year, right? Being able to bring in a Jordan Davis, a Milton Williams, guys off the edge there, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham, right? Being able to have that rotation was so huge. And those guys are gone, right? I get it. Yeah, you still got Nick Bosa. He's still one of the dominant forces. But you lose a key piece at the linebacking core and the safety, and you don't have that depth right now, at least with proven commodities.
Right.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I think San Francisco is having a rough all-around free agency, but definitely on the defensive side.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the worst fit. Who is a guy that I don't think this is going to work out for you, bud? For me, Larry Ogunjobi going over from Pittsburgh to go to Buffalo.
Yep.
And for you,
Grady Jarrett moving from the sunny South in Atlanta up to Chicago.
All right. Why don't you think Garrett is going to bring them back to the good old days there in Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, 4, 5, 6 years ago, Grady Jarrett was one of the best defensive tackles in the league. Like, he was right there. I wouldn't necessarily put him on the same level as a guy like, I don't know,
Aaron Donald.
Yeah, definitely Aaron Donald, but like, he's definitely kind of in that second tier, first tier in most teams. But like, he's lost a step or 2 or 3 in the last year or two. Like, this is not the same interior defensive lineman that I think Chicago fans are hoping for. Like, I just don't necessarily see him making a huge impact in Chicago.
Yep. I think nothing more than a depth piece. If you know,
Yeah.
we'll see how they're viewing it and where the chips will lie. But I agree. He's coming off that ACL tear last year,
Yep.
and it's tough. He's an older player.
Yep.
He had some really
And,
good.
and like you've mentioned before, like a lot of times we will see that second year jump with ACL tears, but like he is getting up there at
Yeah,
this
not
point.
with old
Like
dudes.
I don't necessarily know if he will jump back like a guy would, 4 or 5 years ago
Exactly.
when you're in your mid 20s.
Yeah, I think age is a huge difference there. As far as some guys like Hufanga and Greenlaw and stuff like
Yep.
that. Yeah, no, I agree there. Now, a guy you got familiar with the last couple of years in Larry
Yep.
Ogunjobi. I just, right now he's slated to be a starter there at defensive tackle for the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills really struggled to stop the run.
Mhm.
This was a big deal. Reason why during the regular season they got blown out against the Ravens.
Yep.
They gave up over 115 yards a game, over 4.5 yards a carry.
Yep.
I don't think he helps in this situation.
No.
EFF graded him as, I think it was like a 45 out of 100 as far as a run stopper. He's
Yep.
not a run stuffer.
He's not.
So I don't really love this move, and he's not really a great. I mean, he can get some pressure, but he only had a sack and a half
Yeah.
last season.
And going back to like you said, I'm a Pittsburgh guy. Like their rush defense was not great. I mean, outside of Cam Hayward, there wasn't much of a run stopper
Yeah.
along that defensive line. Ogunjobi was right next to him. He wasn't stopping shit.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I mean, if you're Buffalo, you're looking at this defensive tackle position, and that's what you need. You need somebody who's going to stuff the run. Ed Oliver can be your kind of pass rush defensive tackle. You
Yep.
need a run stuffer, and in my opinion, Larry Ogunjobi is just not that guy. So, yeah, I don't think it's going to be a great fit there in Buffalo. All right, folks, we are a little bit over halfway done with our superlative show for the defensive side, which means it's time for me to remind you about some of the great things we got going on over there at idpplus.com. That is right. You want to definitely head over there and check out the website. We've got all the content, articles, tools, videos, everything you need to help you get through this long off season. Also, check out the YouTube page here. You're already on it, IDP Plus YouTube. Check out IDP Plus Bets. Again, we are going to have you covered all off season. Make sure you subscribe. Turn on notifications. You won't want to miss a thing. And finally, one of the best things about the offseason is the Fantasy Football Expo there in Canton, Ohio. It is a great, great event. You're going to want to make sure you get your tickets early. Go over to get the fantasyfootballexpo.com and start checking that out. All right, my friend, let's continue rolling along. And we're going to roll along with the biggest surprise, the biggest, damn, they did that. And for me, the biggest surprise on the defensive side, Joey Bosa to Buffalo. They are leaving the West Coast to go to the East Coast. And what say you?
Myles Garrett in Cleveland. That whole situation.
Yes. And I do want to point out, Myles Garrett, I do know how to spell your name with
I
the
don't.
Y and not an I. As a Steelers fan, Derek handles our graphics, so maybe that's intentional. I don't have a problem with you, Myles Garrett, in case you ever watch this. But all right. I think is you first or me first?
I'll roll with it.
Let's go.
Why the hell are we paying Myles Garrett $40 million after a guy like Mason Crosby signs a $35 million deal like 2 days prior? Like, I get it. Myles Garrett's a stud. Crosby's also a stud. I get it. You got to get him to stay in Cleveland somehow or want to come back to Cleveland somehow. But like, also, I mean, from a Myles Garrett standpoint, like you harp on, I want to go to a winner. I want to be
Yep.
part of something. Like, okay, an extra couple $1,000,000 will just okay, fine.
Money talks, baby.
I mean, I get it. Like that's life-changing money, but like that whole situation, especially on top of the Deshaun Watson contract, like Cleveland's gonna run into literal salary cap hell in a couple years. Like I can't figure out how they're gonna suit up a roster.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think this is almost like from a straight football aspect, it doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Like Cleveland, they're not that close.
they're really
I
not.
mean, they don't have any ideas what they're doing at quarterback, and that was not a good team last year. I understand they're only a couple of years removed
Their
from
offensive
playoffs,
line's taking a few
whatever.
steps back. Yep.
They don't have an identity right now,
No, they don't.
and just giving all your cash to Myles Garrett is not going to solve your problems. And agree. He was very vocal about wanting to go to a winner and getting out of town,
Yep.
and then he turns around and he's like, "Yeah, all right, pay me enough, I'm staying." So it's like, yeah. So I like that as on your end there. For me, it's the Joey Bosa thing, and the reason for it is, I just was kind of just genuinely surprised.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard like
Yeah.
many rumors about it. It's not
Yeah.
even like a huge like
The
I don't even have
road
a
just kind of
great
came out of nowhere.
angle. Yeah, I just kind of was like, oh shit, okay. Him leaving LA, I don't think it's gonna necessarily be a bad thing. I think a change of
No.
scenery might be what he needs. You
Yeah.
know, can he stay healthy? Was it
We'll
the
see.
Chargers medical staff who was famously known to stab Tyrod Taylor and get Justin and introduce us to Justin Herbert? Was that what's going on, or what's going on there? So, this is just really intriguing
Yeah.
because with Epinesa there, they've lost Von Miller. The Bills, like they need him to be a really good pass rusher
Yeah.
for that
And
defense.
maybe this is one of those situations he's like, all right, because the whole time it's like, will he go join his brother up in San Francisco? Obviously, San Francisco was my biggest loser. They've taken a step back. Maybe they're not seen as a Super Bowl contender. Obviously, the Buffalo Bills are right there in the AFC
Yeah,
conversation. Maybe
and I
he
think
did just want to go see if he can win a ring.
absolutely, and I think for both these teams, this like the team and Joey Bosa himself, this is a really kind of turning point in the career
Yep,
as far as
it's a great point.
Super Bowl window doesn't last forever,
Nope.
as we're seeing with the 49ers, right? This Bills window is getting smaller and smaller, so they need to capitalize. They need for this work. And Joey Bosa, like he went from being a stud guy,
Hmm.
everyone wants to have him on their team, to like this dude can't stay healthy. Why,
Yeah,
what do we need him for, right? So this is a really intriguing signing to me. So that was my biggest surprise.
I like
All
it.
right, let's get over to excuse me, category there, a category, fake news, as in all hype, no bark. I don't buy it. They're hyping this up, and I don't think this is going to work out. For me, Chase Young and his deal back with the New Orleans Saints, and for you,
Yes, kind of a surprise because this guy is now part of my biggest winner, but Milton Williams going up to the New England Patriots.
well, the good thing about this show is you get to explain yourself. So what do you
Yeah,
got going
so
on?
I get it. Like the Pats are bringing in a handful of guys that should make a difference on that defensive side of the ball, but like I just don't know if Milton Williams is worth $104 million. Like 26 million a year for a guy that was next to Jalen Carter and
Jordan
Davis
Davis,
and
and yeah,
Smith and Josh Sweat and all of these dudes. Like he was a rotational piece basically, and because of all the other guys around him, defenses probably were shifting to other studs like Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and all these dudes. So it's like,
absolutely.
is he worth $26 million a year? Is he going to be a key piece in the center of that defense? I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good read too. As far as your call there, a lot like the guy who, you've got a stud group. They were going to get an
Hmm.
A regardless, and you just slap your name on the paper,
Yep.
and you
I
get
think
some.
it's one of those things like, was it? I mean, this was like 10 or 15 years ago when Albert Hainsworth signed that massive contract back in
Yeah,
the day,
yeah,
and he was a shell of himself.
yeah. Or what
And
we
it's like,
thought. Maybe that's what he was the whole time, and just you
exactly.
take him out of that situation, and now you put him on a Carolina defense where they're not the Philadelphia Eagles defense
Yep.
of 2024.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's a good read by you. Chase Young, the deal 3 years up to $57 million for Chase Young. I mean, we're talking about a guy who we didn't know how much longer he was going to be on the field. There
Yep.
was the injuries with the neck and the ACL, and then kind of those injuries, and then there was the motivation aspect. Like, does this guy really want to play football? Does he want to be one of the greats that we thought he could be? Look, he finally played 17 games and he had 5.5 sacks. I mean, he's never even really got close to double-digit sacks. I mean, at
Yep.
7.5 that 2020 rookie year,
Yep.
but I don't know like what the Saints saw in him last season that made them like pour out all this money and really commit to him.
Sure.
They brought him in on a prove it deal, and what? Because he finally played a full season. I just
Yeah.
feels a little bit like a participation trophy to me.
A little
I
bit of
think this
check.
is a Saints defense that is selling the
Yeah.
farm a little bit, and they're not getting any younger. So
Absolute freak of nature athlete. But like you
yeah,
said, like head wise, heart wise, like is he fully engaged in the NFL? Like since he came out of Ohio State, like he just has never really taken that step.
nope. Yeah, I mean, look, he looked pretty good his rookie year, but then after
Yeah.
that, I mean, and even then, there were still questions about is he taking plays off?
Right.
And it's just he's not a guy I'm paying 57 million. I'm telling you
Yep.
that's kind of where I'm at with it. So, look, he might have a fine year, but I don't think he's worth that hype that of the Chase Young coming out of Ohio State.
Agree.
All right, my friend. Last category, and it's the low key category. It's the signing that maybe isn't making all the headlines, but we think could have a pretty damn big impact this next season. For me, that is Leonard Floyd shipping from one coast to the next there, going from San Francisco to the Atlanta Falcons. And for you,
DJ Reed up to Detroit.
all right, why don't you tell us about Mr. Reed and why you view that as a good read by the Detroit Lions?
Yeah, I mean, we know how decimated that Detroit Lions defense was last year, and I mean, for the most part, I think the one area that didn't have as many injuries that I can think of was the cornerback position. The problem was they were all young dudes that just didn't have a ton of experience. Like they played okay, but I think bringing in a guy like DJ Reed, who's an established uh, veteran defensive back that is an absolute stud coming over from the Jets. Like I think this is a massive upgrade in that secondary for a Detroit defense that wreaks havoc from a front seven standpoint when those guys are healthy. So obviously we have to see how all of these guys bounce back after the injuries that they had. But even the last couple of games that of the season going into the playoffs, like once those guys started coming back, it was back to the Detroit Lions defense that we expected.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that Reed is a guy who is underrated. Sauce Gardner gets all the love out there, but he's a solid cover guy. So I like
Yep.
that. All right, my guy Leonard Floyd there. Look, it's a little bit of the situation. He goes back to Atlanta. They're desperate for a pass rush. They
Yep.
had Judon and
Yep.
basically nobody else, right? They were decent on the back end. They've got some guys in the secondary. Young linebacker core, but they need some pressure. They were one of
Yep.
the worst in the league at getting the pressure, and that was just letting people sit back there and pick them apart. So I really just think that the fit, and we'll see what Floyd can do, but he's been a productive guy wherever he's been. Again, coming from San Francisco, before that Chicago, I do think Leonard Floyd is going to really elevate this Atlanta defense, which Atlanta, one botched kind of job away from a playoff.
Yeah.
And I like Michael
Yeah.
Penix, and I think they are a team that could be a playoff contender. I don't think they're that far away, so I really like this signing for their defense.
Sure.
Honorable mention because I have to. Paulson Adebo for my New York Giants, man. One of the best cover corners. Young guy. I know people are worried about him coming off a femur fracture. He's got 11 months. Surgery's going well. It went well. He's already back to running. He was doing flips and things. Like, he's going to be just fine.
Yep.
And fractures, once as long as it's not a complicated fracture, not something we're super worried about for the
Yep.
next season. Something like an ACL, Achilles, Liz Frank, much more
Soft tissue
concerning.
stuff is much more concerning than
Exactly.
bones.
So just had to mention my guy Paulson Adebo. All right, man. that is it. That is it for us there. We talked about the winners, the losers, the surprises, and everything in between for this 2025 offseason, early offseason free agency for the defensive side of the ball. You got anything for the good people before we get out of there?
No, just remember, as this free agency period starts to wind down, the NFL just continues to give us new shit all the time. The NFL draft will be coming in just around a month's time. So hold steady. It's only a few weeks. The NFL will come back.
Exactly, folks. And this entire NFL offseason, we are going to be here to be taking you through it. So you want to make sure you check out idpplus.com. Check out the YouTube. You're already here. Subscribe. Turn your notifications on. You're not going to miss what we're putting out this offseason. And of course, get your tickets for the Fantasy Football Expo. All right, folks. We just did an offensive edition of this. So if you want to talk about who biggest winners and losers for the offense, make sure you check that out. Check out some of these awesome videos that are going to be linked here after that. And from the DGen Doc and Professor Locks here at IDP Plus, we are signing off.